Hello and welcome to the channel. I had a number of questions about these two, on the first glance, very similar watches. So instead of writing a long story in the comments, I decided to record a brief video about the similarities and, more importantly, the differences between these two watches. So without any further delay, let's get into it. Hi and welcome to the channel. If you already subscribed, thank you and very warm welcome back. And if you're new here, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. It does help us to bring you more reviews. We will not battle these watches against each other, but rather compare them, because for example, if you have a slender, let's say 6.5-inch wrist, no matter if the 43mm watch wins, you are more likely to go with the 40mm one purely because it may look more in proportion with your wrist. Because these watches are so similar, well, at least at the first glance, I will go over the similar points first before getting into the differences. We will then explore the differences, compare the lume, and I will even pop the 43mm on the strap to see if that makes much difference to its wrist presence. So, the similarities. Packaging, pretty much the same. As for materials, a really great spec of materials here, and for the most part they are the same as well. Well, almost if you don't count the extra layers of lume on the 40mm version. So what we have on both watches, we have sapphire crystal, stainless steel construction, ceramic bezel, sacred and H35 movements. Both have see-through backs, solid links and solid end links bracelets with machined mill clasps and screws instead of pins. And both watches have 100 meters of water resistance. I have to make a note here, I actually have the first batch model here which still used Miyota movement, but for the purpose of this exercise, let's assume that it is second H35, which you will be getting if you purchase this watch now. Okay, so far so good, and now to the more interesting part, the differences. The 43mm version has been around for about 1 year now and can generally be bought for close to $60 using various discounts during the flash sales on AliExpress, which is an incredible value taking into account the materials used. The 40mm variant was introduced a few months ago. What's more, the black dial, black bezel version was introduced even more recently, somewhere around end of July 2020. It is also a bit more expensive. At the point of introduction, it was priced at $95. However, now it can be found for around $80. Still, it is on average $15 to $20 more expensive than its 43mm sibling. Before we look at dimensions, let's briefly get out of the way the other, mostly less significant differences. Dials. Both dials are very similar. As I mentioned, this is an earlier Miyota movement version, hence the date looks smaller than on the current model with the NH35 movement. So if you buy this watch now, the date will look almost identical to the 40mm watch. The 40mm has a subtle sunburst effect, which I think is quite nice. The 43mm doesn't, but still has a rich piano black, slightly reflective look. My understanding is that some other colors like green, aka Hulk, in 43mm size do actually have a sunburst effect. I like that the 43mm version has slightly larger applied indices, keeping it in proportion with a slightly larger dial. Also, I think it is good that there is no word Explorer on the dial of the 43mm watch. First, it makes dial a bit more basic in my opinion. Also, you will find the word Explorer on at least 2 other Pagani models, so I'm not quite sure what is the point of it. Now, one thing that I am not convinced by is the same set of hands that is used on both watches. And while it is nice and proportionate on the 40mm model, the hands in my opinion could have been longer on the 43mm one. Also, the lume on the 40mm model is better. The lume color is almost identical, however, looks like Pagani put few extra layers of lume on the 40mm watch, so it lasts noticeably longer. This is good news in my opinion, at least you know that you get a bit of extra lume for the slightly higher price for the 40mm version. If we compare the bezels, both watches have ceramic unidirectional bezels. The 43mm has a 90-click bezel and the 40mm has a 60-click one. The bezel action feels slightly different on both watches. The 43mm feels a bit more teeny and has more resistance and a bit of a backplay. I like the 40mm sound a bit more, but it is more lighter and still has about the same backplay as 43mm bezel. To summarize, each bezel action is bad in its own way, but as I mentioned in the reviews of these watches, at this price point it is not a deal breaker for me. I do have to mention though that on my watches the 43mm bezel aligns perfectly with the dial chaptering while the 40mm doesn't. You could be a bit more lucky. Please let us know in the comments if you've got 40mm watch with the perfect alignment or not. Looking at the cases now, they are very similar and good polishing and brushing for this price point. Both declare 100 meters of water resistance, so you should be okay swimming in either of these watches. One place that I do prefer the 43mm version is the logo on the crown. It is definitely more pronounced and looks better in my opinion. Bracelets are very similar, 20mm and 21mm widths for 40 and 43mm watches respectively. Well executed, solid end links and solid links with screws. Very similar class with an easy link style on the fly extension and few micro adjustments. Of course, the key difference, apart from the size, is the polished center links on the 40mm model. This has been a puzzle for many. Why? Okay, it does give the bracelet a bit dressier look, but that's about it. I definitely prefer the brush bracelet on the 43mm version. As you can see, the scratch marks are hardly noticeable. And also, coincidentally, Rolex Submariner uses all brush links as well. Now let's look at dimensions. For the sake of keeping this brief, I'll put the key dimensions on the screen. I have to say that by using 20mm lugs on 40mm watch and 21mm lugs on 43mm watch, Pagani stayed close to 1:2 lug width to watch diameter ratio. In general, the watch tends to look more proportionate if the lug's width is half of the watch diameter, so this is good. The height of both watches is very similar at around 12.7mm, which is also good and coincidentally is pretty much 1:1 with Rolex Submariner. Now, of course, the most interesting part here is lug tip to lug tip measurement, or actually distance between the protruding end links. This is what generally defines how the watch looks on the wrist. The 43mm watch has 52mm lug to lug distance, while the 40mm one has 47.5mm, and end link to end link is 57mm and 52.7mm respectively. The end links on both watches do curve down to hug the wrist. However, if your wrist is considerably narrower than 57mm, then 43mm version will create a bit of a dinner plate look on your wrist. This is not an advice on should you buy it or not, because at the end of the day, it is a matter of personal preference, of course. Some guys and girls do like big, prominent watches. There is, of course, a way to make this watch appear a bit smaller, that is by putting it on a strap. I only had a 22mm strap readily available, but it fitted the 21mm lug width just fine. I think I covered the key points of similarity and differences between these two. Please do let me know if I miss anything, and it would be interesting to know what is your take on these two watches. Please let us know in the comments what would be your reasons for choosing either one of them. And of course, thank you for tuning in, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.